It is Sunday afternoon from East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni from SpartanMag.com. We'll be joined shortly by Paul Konyndyk. He was unable to make the game at Breslin Center today, but he'll be calling in, and we will get his thoughts on the game. He's been a little bit under the weather, a little bit, staying at home, keeping the germs back there at his hometown, but also keeping an eye on the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State, big winner today over at Rutgers, 73-56 at the Breslin Center. Michigan State improves to 10-7 overall, 2-4 in the Big Ten. Had to have this win. In the postgame interviews afterward, Malik Hall said, hey, this was a must-win. So did Trey Hollman. Mid-January seems kind of early for must-win situations, but that's precisely what it was for Michigan State because they were 1-4 in the Big Ten prior to this game, which is the worst start to conference play in the Tom Izzo era, which has made for some consternation, some hand-wringing, some uncomfortable moments thus far in the season. Michigan State coming off a loss at Illinois earlier in the week, 3-point loss at Illinois. No shame in that. However, Illinois lost to Maryland today, 76-67, which makes Illinois look different. I mean, they're going through their own problems with Terrence Shannon being out. Maryland is Michigan State's next opponent. Actually, after Michigan State plays at home against Minnesota, then Michigan State goes to Maryland. A game I thought looked like a really good chance for victory, still is, but in the Big Ten where everybody's having trouble winning on the road, except for Maryland today at Illinois, every week that goes by, teams on the schedule look different, to me anyway, from week to week. Indiana lost at Rutgers last week. Indiana's had some other problems. Good record. But then Indiana goes out there this weekend, has a really strong showing at home against Minnesota. A lot of individual talent on that team because Michigan State's going to be playing the Hoosiers coming up as we get into February. And Michigan State's a team that needs wins just to get on the comfortable side of the NCAA tournament bubble. Then they can start looking toward getting their team together as they head toward March, as has been the case for the last 25 years around here. But the question is whether there's just, because of the slow start this year, not much room for Michigan State to trip up and have any giveaways, have any clinkers, as Izzo's called them a couple of times. They're running out of chips. So when you go to Maryland, that's supposed to be a victory. Before today, I thought that looked like a really good shot at a victory. But Michigan State against Illinois, against Rutgers today, struggled through the first half. It's a close game. Michigan State having trouble on defense. I know it was Michigan State's defense which helped turn the thing around midway through the second half, but in the first half, Michigan State was having trouble with Rutgers with what they were running. There's a lot of motion offense, a lot of screen-the-screener continuity with some back picks, and 3 or 4 times they caught Michigan State. A couple of layups. One time they missed a dunk, another time they missed a layup but got the putback. Izzo said after the game they were running things that they hadn't seen Rutgers do this year. So that was part of it, made some adjustments in the second half. That part of it was not as much of a problem. Rutgers eventually ran out of offense right around the time Michigan State heated things up and got on a 19-0 run. We're going to be hearing from Konyndyk here in a second. And we'll get some thoughts about him, from him, about what he thinks about today's game and the direction of the team and so forth. So Michigan State today, Trey Hollman I thought was excellent. We'll talk about that with Paul here in a second. Hollman came off the bench. Jaden Akins was having some foul trouble. Tyson Walker was not having his best shooting performance. Later on in the game, he heated up a little bit. Walker, 4 out of 12 from the field, hit a couple of threes late, ended up 3 out of 7 from three-point range, which helps his percentage. Ends up looking good in the box score, but for a long time, Walker wasn't giving them offense. Akins was sitting more than usual with some foul trouble. Hogard having a little bit of fumbleitis with some turnovers, playing hard, which Izzo likes. But it was Hollman who came off the bench, ended up playing 27 minutes, and was a plus 21 and plus minus. Hogard also a plus 21. They were the two team leaders. But Hollman was the guy that provided some offensive spark, also steadied some things. This is a guy whose role has become more important since the unfortunate situation with Jeremy Fears being unable to play. With Fears unavailable, Hollman has had to take on more of a point guard role in addition to being a shooting guard, and he did a great job of it today.
Paul Konyndyk.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
All right, let's go out to West Michigan, Alto, Michigan to be exact. Bring in associate editor, SpartanMag.com, Paul Konyndyk. Been under the weather, to say the least. Unable to be at the Spartan basketball game at Breslin Center today, but we're hoping he's doing all right. Paul, you doing okay?
I'm doing great, man. I'm kind of bummed because my kids have got the biggest snow fort built right outside my bedroom window, but I haven't been able to be out there and enjoy it. But I'm doing good. This was a fun game to watch, and even if I had to do it from home.
Well, what were your takes, your main impressions from Michigan State's victory over Rutgers today?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is it doesn't surprise me the least bit that it was a slog in the first half. I mean, Rutgers is fourth in the country in defensive efficiency. They always take away your primary options, and they're just a physical team, and it takes time to adjust to them. But I think once Michigan State adjusted to that style, it was good to see. I was surprised that they executed as well as they did on offense in the second half. But if you look at this game overall, I think this is the kind of game that can give a team a lot of confidence because it's one of those physical, you have to find ways to win type of victory, and that can propel you. I think it was great that Michigan State got a lot of scoring from a lot of different places when it mattered. And I think, defensively and on the rebounding piece, a lot of the things that Michigan State hasn't done well necessarily against physical teams, they did well today. And I think those are all areas of growth. And I think these are all things that Michigan State can build on moving forward.
Trey Hollman, I thought, was excellent today, Paul. The offense was a little bit stagnant at times, and, that thing was a close game, and it had a lot of earmarks of being a game that might go down to the wire, especially after Rutgers answered Michigan State's early barrage in the second half. Rutgers battles back. I think it was something like, 12-1 run for Rutgers or something like that. They took the lead. But during that time when Michigan State needed to steady the ship and get a spark, it was Trey Hollman. Ends up statistically just kind of an okay game. 9 points, 3 field goals, but all 3 were 3-pointers. Had to have all of those. 6 assists, no turnovers. Doing a little bit of quarterbacking, a little bit of shooting guard, a little bit of all those things. Trey Hollman was a huge, huge factor in Michigan State getting this thing on track and winning this game. Hollman, in some ways, I know he's had other games when he scored in double figures and scored more, but all-around game impact in terms of the situation, I don't know if Trey Hollman's had a better, more important performance than this. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think he's one of the most underrated, undervalued players in the Big Ten. He's quietly had a lot of these type of games. I mean, he's a guy coming into the season that you're like, if he can shoot 30% from 3, he can get on the floor. You and I had several text messages going back and forth in the summertime. I was really big on Trey Hollman. I know you like him, but we were talking about, hey, how many minutes can this guy get? Mm-hmm. And, there's even conversation of whether he's really going to be in the playing rotation, even though Izzo indicated that he would be on, in the first press conference. I really liked a lot of what I saw from Trey Hollman, like at Moneyball. And I know Moneyball is kind of a joke in some ways. It depends on what you're looking at. And what I was looking at in Trey Hollman was different than what maybe other people might look at, when we see a guy like Peter Brooks blow up at Moneyball a couple of years ago. But Hollman has gotten better and better and better. And I think the one thing that, that nobody should sleep on this kid. Right now, if my math is correct, and I'm sometimes suspect in that department, but I think he's got 63 assists to 10 turnovers on the year right now. He was number 1 in the country in assist-to-turnover ratio coming into this game. He's easily going to improve on those numbers, and that's kind of a surprise because one of the other things that you and I talked about with Trey Hollman after Jeremy Fears, was after the shooting incident that took him away from the season. One of the things that you and I were talking about is, can Trey Hollman, a guy that's given Michigan State a spark at 2 guard, can he move back on ball where he played last year as a freshman and give Michigan State, what they need in the absence of Jeremy Fears? And Trey Hollman is
going again. All right, Paul.
Hang on a second. I'm going to get a drink of water.
All right, Paul. Well, we're back online now. My computer locked up.
Okay, I'm good.
We're back on the air, Paul. I'm not sure what happened. I assume that this will go ahead and dovetail into the broadcast that we had already started. But anyway, Paul, when my computer locked up, you were talking about Trey Hollman and a guy that you mentioned his turnover to assist ratio was something like 63-10 coming into this game. And I think we locked up right around the time you're talking about your thoughts on Trey Hollman this summer and what you thought he was capable of this year. You want to go back and repeat some of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I saw from him in the summer at Moneyball, which is kind of misleading for some things, but not for other things. What I saw from him is a whole lot more confidence in his jump shot. We've seen that carry over the season. He's above 40% from three on the year so far. But you also saw him running the team well, and I just think it's easy. He's like much like Carson Cooper, much like Jackson Cole. It's easy to forget those guys that were as freshmen. They played a bit role, and Trey Hollman did come on in the NCAA tournament and played minutes as a defensive kind of catalyst for Michigan State. But it's easy to forget about those guys when you've got a highly ranked class coming in. I just think he's easily the most improved player in the program. He's been that from the jump this season, and he's gotten more and more comfortable playing a bigger role as a scorer while balancing that facilitator role as the season has gone on. We saw a few games ago where he's getting more comfortable scoring, kind of going towards the basket downhill. That takes a little bit of an adjustment, sometimes when you're not used to being in that point guard role. But he's also been really good in a lot of other ways. And, you mentioned that 19-0 run, and he made a big three in that run, also had a big assist in that run. He had 5 second-half assists and 0 turnovers. In that huge second half for Michigan State where they scored 45 points today. I think he's kind of coming into his own as both a scorer and as a facilitator. And with him as a point guard, I'm not going to say he's a different type of player than Jeremy Pierce, the freshman who's out for the season after the gunshot injury. But he's a point guard that we shouldn't sleep on because I think he's competent and more than competent, and he's shown that in that assist-to-turnover ratio. That is ridiculous, 63 assists to 10 turnovers. Yeah, after today, he had 57 coming in. He had 6 assists and 0 turnovers. And he's had lots of games this season with 0 turnovers. I think what's more impressive to me is he's at that point now where they can put him at the 2-guard, put him at point guard, and he's able to balance those mentally, without a drop-off. And that's kind of the next – that was the next step for him. I think he's a heck of a player coming off the bench. And he's one of those guys that you can't disregard on the scouting report, and good teams have players like Trey Hollman that are impact players that know their role, are willing to play their role, but can do more if you need them to, and we saw that from him today.
Had to have it today, too, because the offense was sputtering a little bit. It was not Tyson Walker's best day. He finished well late in the game. Hogard was having his struggles, Jaden Akins, foul trouble, and Hollman, like you said, doing some quarterbacking, doing some shooting guard, a little bit of both, playing some defense. Hollman, Izzo mentioned him a little bit in the post-game press conference, but didn't really talk at length about him. And you're exactly right. I wasn't sure about Hollman. There were times this summer when he shot well and sometimes when he didn't. Coming into the season, he had a couple of hot games. The one time when he was in the starting lineup, I think, in place of Tyson Walker, when he took a game off, that might have been the time when Hollman scored 15 or 16 or 17, whatever it was, his career high. I thought there'd be times when he might go 5 for 5 from three-point range like he did in that game. Maybe not 5 for 5, but I thought there were times when he might do that. And then other times when he might go a couple of weeks and have like a 1 for 15 type of thing from three-point range, which has not happened. 41% from three with that assist-to-turnover ratio like you're talking about. 26 minutes today off the bench, playing some point, playing some two, providing, hey, in the first half with the offense sputtering a little bit, he had a couple of three-pointers, both of which gave Michigan State the lead. I think 11 to 10 at one point and 16 to 15 at one point. Didn't know that Michigan State was going to need those, but he did some good things there. And I'm gonna go over that 19-0 run here a little bit. It started with Malik Hall after a timeout, and Rutgers was going to zone after timeouts. They kind of hurt Michigan State once after a timeout, going zone, and Michigan State turned it over. Later in the game, Michigan State, I think, anticipated they would play zone after timeout. Michigan State went to a play, and Izzo, after the game, gave credit to Carson Cooper setting a crucial screen, which ended up with Malik Hall getting open for a dunk. So good job anticipating in-game adjustments, drawing up a play, and Cooper executing, and then Hall finishing in there. And Hall scored 5 points to get that 9-0 run going. And next time down, he scored on kind of that. He had like a half hook, if I remember right, fouled while it happened, hit the free throw, and Michigan State goes up 43-36, and they were on their way. Tyson Walker heated up transition three-pointer from Trey Hollman in transition at the point, getting it up there to Walker to hit a three-pointer. Next field goal, Trey Hollman with a three. Fast break off a Carson Cooper defensive rebound to make it happen. That's 12 minutes to go. Now it's 46-36, 10-point lead, and this thing's off and running. They go to a small lineup, and we'll talk about that in a minute, with a center that Cooper in there with three guards, and then Cohen Carr at the four. And they didn't do that in the first half. I'm wondering if they maybe should do a little bit more of that going forward. Cohen Carr did play the four earlier in the season, not as much in recent games. In recent games, Malik Hall's been getting more minutes, 36 minutes. I think he had against Illinois, for better or for worse sometimes. Carr goes in there, a little bit of a spark, and Carson Cooper ends up getting a dunk in that small lineup from Trey Hollman again. Trey Hollman, drive, draw, dish, Cooper dunk. Trey Hollman again having a direct impact on 3 straight field goals there. And then next time, the next field goal on the 19-0 run, Jaden Akins with a three-pointer from the corner. That's when Hogard was driving, trying to make something happen, and fumbled it. Shot clock's down. Akins hits the three. Frustrating day for Akins overall, but to his credit and his talent, fumble, loose ball, always lethal. You never know when a shooter's going to just rise up and do what he can do. That's what Akins did right there. Hit that three. Makes it 51-36. Ends up with Cohen Carr, small lineup, flashing at the mid-post, shoots, misses, gets his own rebound, goes back up, scores, gets fouled, hits the free throw, 54-36, up by 18 points, 19-0 run. Cohen Carr in there, Carson Cooper in there, Trey Hollman in there. Nice to see the bench having a big impact on the game-changing run, Paul.
I think one of the things that you talk about that small lineup, and I really think the only way you can have confidence in going to that small lineup is if you know that you had the rebounding out there, or your big can rebound with two hands. And I know Carson Cooper only had 5 or 6 rebounds today, but this is one of his better rebounding performances, in my opinion, because Rutgers is a physical team that puts a body on you, and I saw him getting two hands on the ball on rebounds. And pulling it away from contact. If he can rebound as well as he did today, I think you can go small. Same thing with like Madi, if he was in that lineup or whatever. I thought Madi played, did a really nice job today as well, especially rebounding, but playing defense on Omarui. I'm not sure if you can go to that small lineup against a Rutgers team unless you took some things away from them in the first half. And I think one of the things that Michigan State did a really nice job of is defending inside that 2-point arc, making it for Rutgers a half-court game overall, but also making it a perimeter game and it not allowing offensive rebounds and that type of thing. So I think that was a nice change-up for Michigan State, but I think it's best for Michigan State to be able to establish that physicality and then go with a kind of a high-level changer with a small lineup for the second half. I thought this was the best job that Michigan State did in terms of handling physicality. And I'm not surprised that Michigan State was ready for the physicality of Rutgers, because they faced a really physical team against Illinois on Thursday, and they faced some other physical teams this year. I think that they're showing some growth. I think guards are doing a nice job picking up some of the rebounding slack. Even Tyson Walker today, I think he had 2 rebounds. Both of those rebounds were tough rebounds where he went in there and fought through contact for boards. I think Michigan State's learning how to rebound it at a high level, and the care factor, the want to, was really good for Michigan State today. The sense of urgency was high as well. So not everything went right for Michigan State, but they played well defensively throughout. They've scrapped. They won the 50-50 ball. The winning plays type of battle with Rutgers, and that's no small thing, because Rutgers wanted this thing as well. They're trying to turn around their season. They're feeling good coming into this game. And I think Steve Peichel even mentioned that he still feels good about this team afterwards. Beating Rutgers is never easy, and to do it like Michigan State did it is very encouraging, given that you're coming off a really disappointing, tough loss at Illinois, and to bounce back the way they did in a kind of a grinded out game. I really think you can build on these type of wins.
And Rutgers is not good this year. However, they played well today for 25 minutes, similar to how they played when they beat Indiana last week, except, like I said earlier in the show, they changed up what they did on offense a little bit, running some of that continuity that they were doing screen to screener and back screen stuff. They were setting more screens than any team Michigan State has seen this year. Izzo said after the game that they ran some things they weren't expecting. That's how some of those back picks got open for guys at the rim. So that worked for a while. I thought Rutgers was well coached in terms of, like I said, going to zone after timeouts. Michigan State went to a bigger lineup that I think Carr was on the court, or at one point when Kohler was in the game, or maybe it was Booker was in the game, there was a lineup Michigan State had on the court that I'm sure was a lineup that has not been on the court together all year. I can't remember if Booker was part of it or Kohler, or maybe it was Kohler and Carr. I can't remember, but I'm like, that's a strange lineup.
I think it was Booker and Carr.
Booker and Carr together, and Carr was at the 3, and so Rutgers puts on a 3-quarter full court press. It didn't end up creating a turnover. It almost did, but just smart things like that. And Peichel's out there coaching his tail off, and they're losing some games this year. It's too bad that Rutgers didn't get in the tournament last year. They had a good shot at it. Izzo was talking about how they lost 2 players to the transfer portal during the summer, including Mulcahy. He's got to do what he has to do, whatever, but that's a little disappointing because I thought he was kind of one of the faces of Rutgers basketball, and for him to go out to Washington, I mean, he'll never be on TV again playing for Washington. I don't know, maybe Washington's pretty good. They're all right the other night in basketball. But, they lose their roster. He's coaching pretty good, but, you got to wonder if things could get a little bit dicey there. But like you're talking about, Rutgers is not a good team, but they played well today for 25 minutes. You're giving them credit for being physical, and Michigan State met that eventually. So Rutgers just wasn't capable of playing 40 good minutes. Michigan State hit the gas pedal and got it done with some guys getting some confidence. With Michigan State, just in general, big picture, Tyson Walker's averaging over 20 points a game, only 13 points today. Much has been said that there's never been a 20-point scorer for a season in the Tom Izzo era, and this team has not been winning a lot. Walker's scoring a lot. Walker's doing all he can. He's an excellent player, no question about it. But if you're a team that has to be overly reliant on somebody who's shorter than 6'3" these days, there's going to be days like this when you go 4 for 12. When, of course, you're going to be, as Walker goes, that's how Michigan State's going to go. But you don't want that to be so pronounced. That's why guys like Akins, Hogard, Malik Hall, they've got to find a measure of consistency. We've been saying that all year. Izzo also talked about that in the post-game press conference. And when you're talking about confidence, I think Malik Hall comes out of this 6 out of 9 from the field, 28 minutes, solid game, 6 rebounds. A guy that they're really always concerned about his confidence, and he was an offer against Northwestern. He's played pretty good. 4 of the last 5 games. Your thoughts on Malik Hall and Michigan State, and whether they're capable of starting to sock away victories against beatable opponents, like at home against Minnesota in a few days, at Maryland, and later on, like at Minnesota in about 5 games. At Wisconsin's going to be its own animal. Wisconsin's playing real well right now. That's going to be a tough one. I wouldn't put it past Michigan State to go up there and play real well. But can they start socking away victories? 2 games against Maryland coming up in the next 6. Is this team ready to do something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. The Maryland game somewhat concerns me when you look at what Michigan State, when they play those guys in the past. Sometimes they struggle with that team. I've watched Maryland a couple times in the last couple weeks, and they got moments where they're really good when Dante Scott is scoring, but he's kind of their version of Malik Hall. And him and Julian Reese, their center, and their power forward, Dante Scott, who's been there for 6 years, he has a real good chance to be very good. He's playing really well right now. When he plays well, Maryland is good, but it's like all about consistency and performance in a lot of ways. And you look at Michigan State, and Tyson Walker's been outstanding this year. I don't think it's as much the fact that he's a smaller guard. I think that it's the fact that when he is your only scorer, he has to work so hard to get open and to get kind of looks. And some of it has to do with size, but some of it just has to do with the way defenses are playing him. Today, Rutgers kind of did a nice job of trying to take him away. Tyson Walker, I think you can't. Every time Michigan State's had a guy that was capable of scoring 20 points a game, there's been a tendency to overplay that guy. And I think when you play the way Michigan State plays and you get up to the point where you're 30 over 34 minutes a game, there's diminishing returns. We saw it with Cassius Winston. We've seen it with guys like Drew Neitzel over the years, and they've got to try to manage Tyson Walker's minutes a little bit. Today was really nice in that even though Tyson Walker wasn't scoring, he did a nice job as a facilitator. He made some tremendous passes today. You want to get balance if you're Michigan State. I don't think there's any reason to think that this team can't start putting away wins. But to me, it's not so much of who are the scorers going to be. It's about, can these guys rebound at a high level? Can they play consistent defense? But I really think to me, a lot of it comes back to rebounding. People ask me all the time, why isn't Michigan State as good, or why aren't they as good as some of the other Izzo era teams? Because there are aspects of this team that are really good. And to me, it comes back to two things. One is inconsistency on the glass. They don't, besides Monty Sissoko, they don't have a guy on this roster that can legitimately press for 10 rebounds a game if they're not in foul trouble. And they've got to do it collectively. So rebounding is one big thing that I think Michigan State has to continue to get better at.
Yeah.
They've taken steps forward and backward.
Yeah.
Illinois was just a huge team. I mean, Illinois is way bigger than Michigan State, and that was a lot of the deal there. But when it comes to Michigan State playing well, they have to clear the defensive glass. If they don't, you're going to give teams second chance points. I thought Michigan State did a great job today rebounding. Rebounded Rutgers 37-30. Rutgers only had 6 second chance points. The other thing Michigan State did today was, you said that Rutgers is a bad team, and I agree with you, but one of the things that Rutgers does well, this Rutgers team does, is they score in transition. They only scored 6 transition points today, averaging 20 transition points a game this year. So if Michigan State can play defense consistently and they can also rebound, I think rebounding is the big key. If you're not rebounding, everybody's working harder for everything. If you're not rebounding, you're not running. Michigan State has to continue to get good rebounding numbers. Carson Cooper, that's a guy that can take a step. Malik Hall, if he rebounds like he did today, that's a good thing. But they've got to be able to out-rebound opponents and not give up second-chance scoring opportunities. Then I think Michigan State can be the best version of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, never going to be a great rebounding team. Just needs to be good and occasionally quite good. Like you said, Illinois, a lot of size.
I guess the other thing is the stretch 4 component. You know, Malik Hall, and I went back and looked at it in the story I wrote post-game. You know, if you take away that Northwestern game, Malik Hall, since December 30, is averaging something like 16.5 points, 6.5 rebounds a game. Michigan State can win a lot with that version of Malik Hall. The one thing that I would say is Malik Hall did a really nice job being aggressive, but can he be aggressive in terms of shooting the basketball? He had a nice 3 today, on a feed from Tyson Walker. I like that from him, but the 2 biggest things, in my opinion, are going to be, can they get perimeter jumper from that 4 position? Can they get consistent rebounding? I know this isn't a great Michigan State team rebounding, but they need to be better than they have been in some of the games they've struggled.
Yeah, rebounding. Today you talked about limiting second chance points. Illinois, 34 missed shots, offensive rebounds on only 6 of their misses. That's 17% offensive rebounding percentage for Rutgers. Did I say Illinois? I meant Rutgers. Rutgers, only 6 offensive rebounds on 34 misses. Michigan State, to your point, clearing the defensive glass today, 17%. That's excellent defensive rebounding for Michigan State, clearing 83% of those, and they got some transition points out of that. Meanwhile, Michigan State was not great on the offensive glass of their own, around 26% or so. But you can live with that when you're clearing the defensive glass like that. Malik Hall 1 out of 1 from 3-point range today. He passes up quite a few to give a teammate a better shot. So you got to like that unselfishness. Hits a 3 today. He's up to 29% now from 3-point range for the season. I thought 33% and above would give them what they need there. He's inching along in that direction, but he needs to be a guy that's comfortable getting it and letting it fly 3 times a game. I'm not sure that over the long haul that would be, no pun intended, whether that would be productive for Michigan State, but that's the type of thing we've been saying since the beginning of the year that would help put this team over the top. Interestingly, the 3-pointer that he had today was on the first possession of the second half. First possession of the second half, they posted Malik Hall up like they did the first possession of the game. Scripted, Malik Hall posting up first possession of the game, first possession of the second half. James Edwards style, if you go back to the old Bad Boys Pistons days. Not that he's a bad boy, not that he's a James Edwards, but Izzo making a concerted effort to get him involved early, get him in the block, get him a feel for it, maybe get him some points, maybe draw a foul. All right, second half, first possession, down low to Hall. Didn't work out, came back out, got fumbled around. Shot clock situation, Hall has to shoot because of the shot clock situation, and he makes it. Sometimes that clock is a good motivator to get that shot off, and good for him to go ahead and score. And as you said, productive in 4 of the last 5 games, which makes them a different team. And Izzo spoke to that after the game, saying, he's a guy that's extremely important for this team to get to where they need to be. And he's a guy who's still searching for that consistency, still searching for confidence. Basically, that makes Michigan State, in my opinion, a team that you can't really trust. I talk about teams that you can't trust. Michigan State's there right now because he is such a good, an important component. And although he's been consistent for the last 5 games, maybe I'll change my outlook on that if he puts together 5 or 6 more. And good kid, everybody likes him. Locker room after the game today, he felt good about it. He said, hey, I might, he said the words to the effect that, maybe I'll go out and not play well in the future or have a bad game, I think is what the way he said it. He's aware of the consistency issues, and he's trying everything he can to get it done. And I tell you what, I go to practice once a week. They allow us in there, and Malik Hall, after practice, is the last one to leave. He's the guy that takes in an extra 53 pointers. He's working on it, and he deserves it. But I don't trust it yet in terms of Michigan State, a team that I would say is extremely dangerous of doing what they did last year, get to a Sweet 16 and be within overtime of going to an Elite 8. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I'm not as confident about that as I was 12 months ago. But Malik Hall taking some steps for sure today. Paul, anything else you want to talk about? As far as Maryland goes, Maryland won at Illinois today. They held Illinois to 32% shooting from the field. I don't know what's going on with Illinois, but there's a lot of teams that are struggling on the road in the Big Ten. Today, Illinois struggled at home. And across the country, it's hard to find any team that's winning with consistency. And you're certainly not seeing it in the Big Ten either. So Maryland's up next. Paul, anything else before we let you go? What'd you think about the Stephen Izzo?
I just think sometimes it's a matchup thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just mention something with Illinois, Michigan State. It's a matchup thing sometimes. That the length that Illinois has, and they get up for Michigan State. They always do. That's a big deal. There's a lot of pride there. I just think, first off, I'd say one thing I've noticed about Illinois is, in terms of culture and whatnot, that's kind of a mercenary program. So it doesn't surprise me to see things swing up and down, then feel really good about themselves after a win and then take a step back. I think Illinois's got a ton of talent. I think against Michigan State, Ty Rogers has had some big games against Michigan State. There's a lot of emotion when he plays Michigan State, and I think Coleman Hawkins is another guy that's had some big games against Michigan State. But there's a lot of matchup issues in terms of in the rebounding thing. I think it's really hurt Michigan State against Illinois. They've got a lot of size and they've got a lot of big depth. But sometimes matchups have hurt Michigan State against Michigan State. There's a lot of emotion has been at times a real problem for Michigan State, but I'm looking forward to see what happens in the games ahead, because I think Michigan State, despite their win-loss total, they're doing some good things and they're getting some good stuff and some decent areas. You talked about Jaden Akins earlier. That is best game, but there's been games this year where he scored double figures where I didn't feel like he made as big an impact. I feel like when he was in the game today, he's still actively searching for rebounds. He hit some threes. The three that he hit, I think one of those where it was kind of like a deflection. It came to him and he hit a three. I'm not sure if he's making that shot earlier in the season.
I agree.
Where
he did what a dangerous shooter should do. That is, when he has an opportunity, he capitalizes.
Right, and I think that's one of the things we undervalue in a game against like a team against Rutgers. It's like, what can you do to make plays when things don't go the way they're scripted? Like when you're coming off a screen and you get knocked down and the ball's like rolling on the floor, someone picks it up and makes a play. And I think Michigan State did a better job when things were kind of coming unglued, whether it's keeping a ball alive, getting offensive rebound in a timely fashion. just hustling for something that eventually led to a scoring opportunity that might not have been scripted, but was a winning play nonetheless. And I think some of the adversity that Michigan State has faced throughout the year, and they played some really tough games against some tough opponents, and 3 of these 4 Big Ten losses are on the road. I just think that you can't grow from that. There's been a lot of teams over the years. Every year there's a team where I'm like, oh, they're terrible this year. Because you're not like looking closely at the schedule that they played, necessarily in Big Ten play, where some of these games are on the road, some of the matchups are tricky. The Nebraska team creates some weird matchups for Michigan State with a size. Michigan State doesn't do good against teams that are kind of overly small like Nebraska, and that was a weird game. So I wouldn't sleep on Michigan State as long as they can continue to grow and get better in certain areas. I think they'll only be as good as they can be in terms of how good they can get at improving rebounding. And that Malik Hall, that stretch 4 component, is a big deal, I think. He's never going to be a Joey Hauser, but can he hit an open shot? And that's gonna tell us a lot about Michigan State moving forward.
And I thought it was alarming the way Michigan State was just at about 90% focus, in my estimation, for the Northwestern game. Northwestern's good, but you saw some box-out errors, and those are the type of things that they cannot afford if they want to go on a binge of victories here, which they need to get back in a comfortable state in terms of the NCAA tournament bubble. Michigan State's 10-7, 2-4. If it weren't for Michigan State, you'd look at it and you're like, man, they're on the negative side of the bubble. Maybe this is one of those, it's a bad year. But Michigan State does not have bad years. Like Izzo said today in the postgame, he's had his back against the wall before, and he's comfortable with it, and they usually come out of it pretty good. I'm going to go over to the next few games here. Check this out, Paul. And I did this, for an article I wrote last week. On one hand, this is favorable. On the other hand, it's difficult to read. I'm going to give the games here, and you tell me if it's off the top of your head if you think it's a Michigan State win or a loss. At home against Minnesota. It's a win, right?
I would say that's a win, but
yeah.
Right.
At Maryland. A week ago I was thinking that's a win. Then they go and they beat Illinois today, but let's call that one a win. All right, at Wisconsin.
Well, hey, the one thing I'd say with Maryland is they don't have the home court that they've had in the past. I was shocked when I watched I forget which game. I was watching the Michigan-Maryland game the other night or whatever. I DVR'd it. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't believe how few fans there were at Maryland. That used to be one of the best venues in college basketball.
Yes. That is strange. I mean, that is a basketball school with great tradition, national championship in 2001. And the interest there, as reflected by the empty seats, is shocking. And I've not spoken with people around there as to what's causing it. Now, Turgeon, I thought, had them in the tournament. They were dangerous a few times, never quite turned the corner. I'm wondering if it's just, you've got fans that are accustomed to seeing Maryland against North Carolina, Duke, NC State, Wake Forest, and instead they're getting Northwestern, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. Those sound like good opponents to me and you probably, but maybe that's part of it too. I wonder if that was an unforeseen consequence of joining the Big Ten, is that the basketball interest there is falling off a cliff. But you're right.
I don't think so, because when they won when they tied Michigan State, I think it was for the Big Ten championship, in Turgeon's only year where they did that, the fan support was ridiculous there. It's recent, and the level of fan apathy, I think it's something that we don't notice as much in the Big Ten because there's so much fan support. This conference it leads the country in attendance every year, but there's something about that Maryland program. I think it's apathy. I think the other thing is there's not as much talent in that DMV area, and I think one of the things that was always interesting to me when it came to Maryland basketball is there was a lot of players from that region, and I think when you have there's a big high school basketball following out there, and when you don't have that. It can fall off. I think Minnesota's another team that used to have a huge fan following and has a really strong high school basketball culture in the Minneapolis area. The apathy level is pretty bad, I think, in sports in general, in the college game. But it's kind of sad to me to see a team like Maryland fall off. But I would more kind of subscribe to your line of thinking. Maybe there's some of it. If Maryland was, if they had lack of fan support when they played, when they were when they won a Big Ten championship, I just think it's more like they assume that Maryland can't beat high-level teams, and there's not an excitement level. And the newspaper coverage is also weird out there. I remember when Georgetown had pretty good teams, and you see columns in the Washington Post or whatever, or the Baltimore paper, questioning whether Steve Blake should be a guy brought back to as a head coach at Maryland. It's a weird deal. I just wonder about the entire basketball culture there.
Yeah, that's lazy journalism, right? It's like, oh, the team lost a couple of games. How about
absolutely.
Like all the people that used to say that Purdue should hire Bob Greasy every 5 minutes.
Right.
The other thing that's going to be a factor for some of these programs, I don't know if it's ever going to come home to roost or not, but one of the changes in college sports, of course, is the transient nature of these rosters. Players coming and going. A fan base can't fall in love with a Cassius Winston for 4 years anymore. That's going to be rare nationwide. I've not really examined Maryland's roster, but maybe that enters into it also, that you don't want a guy to come in and live with a guy for 3-4 years and they're really your team. Instead, with players changing teams all the time, the affinity for the school itself and the brand, that's a challenge for athletic departments nationwide.
I think with Maryland, though, you look at, they've got a roster built around 3 veteran players. You got Jameer Young, who was a couple of years ago a really good guard. Then you've got Donta Scott, who's like one of the, he's the Malik Hall of their program. And then Julian Reese is a guy that was like, I believe he was on the All Big Ten defensive team at one point. So that's 3 guys that have been around for a long time. Maybe Reese hasn't been around as long, but I just think it's the nature of you got to win and win at a high level. And when teams like that come into the Big Ten Conference, and Maryland really struggled, except for that 1 year where they put it all together, but they've really struggled against the halves in the Big Ten Conference. It shows you the depth in the conference and how tough it is to win on the road in places like a Michigan State, at a Wisconsin, at Purdue, at Illinois. Sometimes matchups play into it. I'm not sure what happened with Illinois. That's a very, very tough road venue, but who knows? It's interesting to see how easy it is for fans to give up on their team.
Well, one thing that happened, you mentioned Coleman Hawkins a minute ago with Illinois. What was he, 3 out of 5 from three-point range against Michigan State? All 3 huge shots. Three-pointers are always huge, especially in a close game. Well, today he's 0 for 4 from 3. 0 for 4 from 3-point for Illinois against Maryland. That's part of the random nature of college basketball. So anyway, Maryland,
right.
At Maryland, that's going to be a key game. Minnesota is much improved. Michigan State gets them at home Thursday night. Then they go to Maryland 7 days from now for a Sunday afternoon game. And that's going to be a bellwether game, I think. Can Michigan State go on the road, get a road victory against the Maryland team that showed today they could win at Illinois? You go and you lose that game, and then you're back down to 3-5, and maybe you're just treading water. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back for the rest of the year. I don't know. That one at Maryland's going to be key. You're playing Maryland 2 times in the next 5 games. They need to sweep Maryland. Let's put that one down as a win. I don't know if you're playing along with me here, Paul, or not, but just for giggles, next 11 games, let's go over them. Minnesota, win. At Maryland, let's call it a win. At Wisconsin, are you playing along, Paul?
That's to me. I'm playing along, and that's a loss to me because Wisconsin's played as well as anybody in the conference, and they show no signs of taking that Wisconsin step back. I think that they've got personnel now, a mixture of veterans that have been on the program and a bunch of guys that are also playing their roles. I think Wisconsin is the team to beat, and that's one of those. If Michigan State was to win at Wisconsin, we've seen it in the past, but that would be kind of a season-defining type thing, and they're going to have to score a lot of points in transition, and they sure as heck have to rebound better than they did the first time. But again, if you go back to that Wisconsin game, I thought Michigan State was in it for quite a while, and then the wheels fell off, and part of it was Malik Hall was coming off an injury, and he was completely ineffective as a rebounder, as anything in that second half, and that hurt Michigan State badly. If Malik Hall plays like he did today against Wisconsin, they might have a puncher's chance. And
Wisconsin has won 6 straight games, 13-3. scoring a lot of points, unlike Wisconsin. The addition of the kid Storr, the wing scorer, big addition for Wisconsin this year. Yeah, I'd agree. For argument's sake, yeah, Michigan State, that's the type of game they go on the road and win that's what they do, but we'll put it down as a loss because that's the way both teams are playing right now. All right, at home against Michigan. At home against Michigan, that's a win, right? Crappy thing about that's going to be 9 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. Thanks a lot, Peacock. 9 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, Michigan versus Michigan State. Playing at 9 o'clock just to sell subscriptions to Peacock. That's disgusting. Today was great. Noon tip-off. Remember the good old days when half the home games on weekends, more than half would be Saturday afternoon games? It's beautiful today. But anyway, Michigan. Then they get Maryland at home, so we'll call that one a win also. So if that happens, you're holding serve these next 5 games, win 4 of the next 5, I think that's doable. At home, I'm sorry. Now this is another one of those swing games. After the Maryland game, at Minnesota, Tuesday, February 6th. What do you think?
I think Michigan State's going to win that game. I'm not really big on Minnesota. They've gotten better this year, but I think Michigan State, again, I don't know because it comes down to rebounding, but if guys like Monty Sissoko continue to rebound as well as they have and Malik Hall can chip in, if Michigan State plays with maximum effort, it gets to kind of hustle plays or plays with the effort that they played today, and they played with great effort against Illinois, but if they play how they've played recently effort-wise, I think they win that game too.
And you talked about rebounding. Michigan State's rebounding better. You know what's strange about this game, about this team? It's probably problematic and bothersome, at least it's becoming that way to me. Michigan State might get an offensive rebound, or someone might drive, draw, and dish to somebody inside, and they'll get it inside, but they can't score at the 1-yard line. Sissoko can't score at the 1-yard line. Cooper made a real nice drop step today and drew a foul at the rim, but he's done a good job with his footwork and his body control, but he's not finishing, which it's easy for me to say. At my limited height, to sit there and watch and say, well, he should be making those shots. But that's one of those next step things for this team across the board. And I don't know if they can get there if they just get to the rim and run out of talent. Sissoko, not a guy to put it back up and in a whole lot. Now, sometimes he does, goes up there and has some nice dunks on some alley-oops and so forth. Malik Hall sometimes gets it in there and kicks it back out rather than going up strong. So that's, when you're trying to scrap together points any way you can in some of these tight games that'll come up, those are the difference makers that might end up being short all year for Michigan State. But I agree. I'm going to give them a win at Minnesota. That's also a 9 o'clock Peacock game. Thank you very much. It's at Minnesota. Then back home against Illinois, February 10th. Who knows what Illinois is going to look like by then? Your thoughts on Michigan State?
I'm going to give Michigan State, again, at home, I'm going to give Michigan State a win over Illinois. I think they're going to be highly motivated for that. I also think who knows what Illinois' roster is going to be like. But I'm telling you what, man, having covered the Big Ten tournament, for several years throughout the Brad Underwood era, he does not care about, I don't know, maybe he says he cares about culture or whatever, but if the team doesn't have strong leadership from an individual that there's a respect, the Frazier kid a couple of years ago, I think he was a big deal. Or I'm sorry, I don't know who it was, but the one guard that they had. But they've got a culture issues. They have player leadership issues, and I'm not talking about guys not talking on defense. I'm talking about knuckleheads. And there's there's a lot of talent in that Illinois team, a lot of length, a lot of strength. But there's some squirrely dudes in there, and seeing those guys in person, I always wonder how they're so good for a little bit in the Big Ten, and then they seem to fall apart. But there's some culture issues with Illinois basketball.
Next game at Penn State, Valentine's Day, Wednesday night. You're taking a long time on these, Paul.
I mean, you think that's a win, but you never know, because the second time you played them, you destroyed them the first time. Mm-hmm. You destroyed them the first time, and is it going to be that easy in transition? Our Penn State, I think Penn State was deer in the headlights when they played Michigan State. Mm-hmm. Michigan State can't have that laissez-faire attitude like I felt like they had against Northwestern. You got to bring it, and if the sense of urgency is high, there's no reason why they shouldn't win in Happy Valley. But playing on the road is a different animal than playing at home. And every year, there's a couple games that you think are no-brainers that that teams end up dropping.
And that's why
I'll
these
give it
games
a
are
win,
so
though.
important to collect all these wins. We'll put it down as a win. I know it's not going to happen. All these wins are not going to happen. But this is what they have to do to get back on course, and it's doable. After playing at Penn State, they go and play at Michigan February 17th. Again, we have no idea what Michigan's going to look like. They've fallen off the cliff here lately. No idea what's going on with their bench. Juwan Howard allowing Martelli to coach against Penn State at the Palestra last week. And the Doug McDaniel situation. That Doug McDaniel's an excellent talent, but he's only playing home games, which to concentrate on academics, they're saying. No, I'm not buying that. I don't know what's going on there. Nothing against McDaniel. I don't know if someone in the athletic department is putting constraints on Juwan Howard in the basketball program there that other programs might not have to deal with this year for some reason. I don't know if he's getting the Johnny Orr treatment. The things Johnny Orr used to complain about that would happen there, that Schembechler would mandate. Anyway, I'm thinking, we don't know what Michigan's going to look like on February 17th, but probably a victory it would look like right now. Then at home against Iowa and at home against Ohio State. Got to win those two games, right?
Absolutely. Iowa's always tricky because they run some good stuff on offense. They're usually terrible on defense, and, that's one of those games where Iowa's always scary, but Michigan State always seems to handle them at home. I'd give Michigan State the win at Iowa. The Ohio State game kind of scares me in some ways because they do have some talent that might match up well with Michigan State. It depends on how the games are getting called. I feel like Ohio State they do a pretty dang good job of mauling you without getting called for it. It reminds me of Minnesota football circa Glenn Mason. In terms of what their offensive line did, holding on every play, but who knows? Ohio State is not lacking in talent, but I just some of these programs have some talent but lack direction. I think they could describe a lot of programs in the Big Ten. Some might probably say that if they were in a different team doing a similar type of broadcast to what we're doing right now, they might say Michigan State's one of those teams. I don't think that Michigan State has culture problems. I wonder about some of the other teams in the program. Michigan definitely has culture issues. You can see it on the court. I forget which game it was where Doug McDaniel had a chance to tie it or win it at the buzzer. He missed a shot and he was kind of by himself, and nobody came over for a good 30 seconds to pick him up and dust him off. And I'm like, when you see stuff like that, you just like, what is up with this team? They're not playing for each other.
Mm-hmm. And if we put that one as a victory, and this is not going to happen. Michigan State's not going to win all these games we're talking about. There will be steps backward. It's the nature of college basketball, especially on the road. But conceivably for Michigan State to go 10-1 in their next 11, that's what we have. With questions, at Maryland on January 21st, at Minnesota February 6th, at Penn State February 14th. There's a lot of parity. Michigan State likes to think, and Michigan State observers like to think that Michigan State is above that line of parity this year, or could be, or should be. Maybe they won't be. Maybe they'll be swallowed up into this, and they'll get back up to 500 and just stay around 500 like everybody else. But it's not unthinkable to rattle off 10 wins in the next 11, and then you're waking up, in late February, and all of a sudden the team is 20-8. When everybody was firing Izzo last week on our message board at SpartanMag.com. And I lashed out at some people. I probably went overboard a little bit, but you got to let it play out. They've fought off the ropes as a program a number of times over the years. Can they do it again this year? I'm not convinced that they will, as much as I was 12 months ago when that was an unpopular opinion. But it's on the table there for them to go ahead and make that type of run, unless they revert back to what they did in the Northwestern game, which is possible. If they win 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 8, they might get fat and sassy, as Izzo likes to say, take their eye off the target a little bit, and somebody jumps up like at Penn State and nips them. As far as Iowa goes, they just beat Nebraska. Nebraska's a good team, but Tominaga goes out and goes 1 of 5 from 3-point range. And Iowa beats them, scores in the 90s. Iowa shoots 35 three-pointers, and they make 15 that day, 15 out of 35. One thing about this weekend and this week and some of the games, Indiana looked pretty good at home against Minnesota. Some of these teams look good, Jekyll and Hyde, on certain days. I watched Indiana against Minnesota. I'm like, man, they got 3 or 4 matchup problems. Going to be a problem for Michigan State. But then you watch Indiana against Rutgers. They lose to Rutgers, lose a little bit of focus. Nebraska just takes Purdue to task with a big man, Reich mass to the big man, feeding the high post, as good of a passer as he is. Gave Purdue all kinds of trouble because he could play some defense a little bit against against Edie. And then after that great win for Nebraska, one of the best wins they've had in program history, they go on the road and get punked by Iowa. It's up and down, up and down. Michigan State needs to get out of that rat race, put together some wins. What they did today looked good for about 14 minutes in the second half, but what happened in the first half can lead them into just more of this parody mosh pit. So in my opinion, we saw a little bit of both today. Paul, anything else you want to talk about before I let you go?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole Iowa thing is, you go back to Iowa, it's like where you play them. They're awesome at home. Mm-hmm. They're really hard to beat at home, and they're not so good on the road. So I'm not, Michigan State needs to continue to work on themselves. I think that the pieces are there, and I'm not ready to give up on this team by any stretch of the imagination. And I think even in some of their losses, they've done some good things. Yeah. It hasn't been. They haven't, here's the thing about college basketball that I've noticed a lot. Being sick for the last week, just flipping channels, is there's some good teams out there that are getting their butts kicked by a lot of points, on the road and whatnot. And I think one of the things that we don't maybe pay enough attention to is, Michigan State's, even though they've lost in some of these games, you're seeing some warts. It's like this almost every year for Michigan State, where Tom Izzo talks about his warts. There's a lot of other teams out there with warts.
Oh yeah.
And the coaches don't talk about them. We don't pay attention to them. But there's a lot of teams getting blown out by 25, 20, 30 points on the road, even sometimes at home, and that's kind of a head scratcher. I think Michigan State has been competitive. They've been in a lot of close games. They haven't won all of them, and some of that's been for different reasons. But I think if guys like Malik Hall, if he continues to play at a reasonably high level where you could get 10 points and 5 rebounds out of him every game, and then you see a guy like Konyndyk, if he can continue to come along a little bit, and we've seen freshmen in Michigan State get better.
Yeah.
Not take steps backwards, and it's not like he's played a ton of minutes, so I could see him getting better. Jaden Akins is learning how to do different things, contribute when he's not scoring, and I think, you look at guys like Trey Hollman. There's a lot of guys on this team that still have a lot of upside, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement on this Michigan State team. I think they're a good team with a poor record right now, and they've had some self-inflicted wounds, and they've also played better than I think they've been given credit for, during the Big Ten. There's been some close losses, some games that they'd like to have back, but it's not like they're getting beat by 30 points. And I think they can get better, and I think they will, and I think they will have a decent record. Maybe not what people expected coming into the season, but I think this team will be formidable, when it comes to postseason play.
There's a lot of teams out there that are like 13-3, 12-4, 13-3, that type of thing. Well, let me tell you something. Difference between those teams and Michigan State is the schedule. I mean, look at Michigan State's losses. Tell me what's a bad loss. Tell me what a bad loss is in here. Lost to James Madison. Not a bad loss. You go 1 for 21 for 3-point range, miss all your free throws, you lose by 3 points. James Madison. Lost to Duke. Lost to Arizona. Lost to Wisconsin. Lost to Nebraska. Lost to Northwestern. Lost to Illinois. That's it. They're 10-7. If they played a schedule like everybody else, you know what they'd be? They'd be 13-3, just like all the other teams out there. They're scheduled harder, and they usually are better for it. Got news for you also. The AP top 11, 9 of the top 11 lost a game this week, at least one. Purdue lost, Houston lost, Kansas lost, Tennessee lost, Kentucky lost, Arizona lost, Oklahoma lost, Illinois lost, Marquette lost. 9 of the top 11. Nobody's any good. But at some point, there'll be some good teams later in the season. Wisconsin's pretty good for now. We'll see if they can hold on to it or not. One other thing, Konyndyk, he gets in there, he makes an impact. And, was it the Illinois game? He only played like 7 or 8 minutes. They're with a guy that can play 2 positions, the 4 or the 3. I think he's a spark. I think that he gives them some horsepower. Now there's some defensive matchups that he can do it physically, but in terms of knowing your assignment, he's a guy that wants to get it done. And I agree with you. I think Konyndyk is a guy increasingly can be more of an impact. And they I'm not a guy that always talks about. Rarely do you hear me talk about someone needs more playing time, but Carr, he had a big impact in that 19-0 run today. You mentioned culture. Michigan State, Steven Izzo making that shot today. The reaction of Tyson Walker picking him up, throwing him to the teammates, and the way they responded to that. That's a window into the soul of this team. And when Izzo said after the game that this team has an it factor to it, he didn't come out and say it, but I think that's part of what he's talking about. Izzo loved it back in 2000. One of the things he loved about the team, he said, somebody played a trick on Mateen Cleaves. All of a sudden he couldn't find his keys or something, and he's looking all around, and it was a prank of some sort. And then they finally found out who did it. Who did it? It's Matt Ishbia. And Izzo's like, and he told that story back then, and a couple of years afterwards, he said the great thing about that team is the last guy on the bench could play a trick on the first team All-American, and everybody get a big hoot out of it. Now that's before Ishbia became famous for other reasons, but those type of things for coaches are a big deal. You talk about culture and whether Illinois has it, and some of these other teams, Michigan State has it. They may not have the enough killers on their team. They'd like for, Malik Hall to have a little bit more spice to him and so forth. Maybe he'll get there a little bit. But the culture part is a positive check, and that's not a small thing, Paul, before I let you go. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and they do have some good dudes. Like, we talked about Trey Hollman coming on. That guy's a good guy that's willing to play his role. I think Cohen Carr, that freshman class, I think those guys are all pretty good dudes that it hasn't been easy for those guys, but they've accepted their roles. I think this is a game where a little bit easier for Cohen Carr to play minutes in this game as opposed to some of the matchups. Going up against Illinois, where the way they run that offense is kind of tricky. Going up against Nebraska is tricky. But it all comes down to me. I mean, I think that the culture is very, very strong for Michigan State. The family atmosphere, all that, the toughness, I think is there, even though it doesn't always show. The want to, the drive is there. But I think it just comes to getting, not doing what you can't do, but just getting a little bit better at what you can. And I think Michigan State's going to get there. I like the mindset of this team. I think they're focused on each other, and that's maybe a little bit better than where some of those guys were, coming into this season. I think Jaden Akins is a guy that is focused on team stuff right now, as opposed to, showing what he can do in this instance and that instance. I see a lot of guys doing a lot of good things. Today, I was really encouraged by, some of the extra passing that took place. Tyson Walker has been so good going to the basket, but he made a couple terrific passes off of drives today that, a lot of guys would have definitely tried to score there to keep their average up. No, he was looking for his teammates. And you saw that across the board for Michigan State today, guys making extra passes. A really good win for Michigan State. It was good for them to celebrate together. There was a comfort level, and I think they're having fun out there. You could see that in the body language during this game. And I think for a team like Michigan State, who had super high expectations, sometime after you get punched in the mouth, you got to get to that point where you're not gripping about what your record is and just kind of move forward and say, hey, we just got to chip away at the rock face and put one foot in front of the other, whatever your cliche is. But that's not always easy to do for a team that had high expectations. I kind of feel like Michigan State's at that point where they can move forward, and be productive. I think they've taken a bunch of lumps, and I think they're going to grow from that.
Mm-hmm. And Rutgers did give them a nice test for about 25 minutes, and it was Michigan State well-earned victory. Now can they start socking away wins against beatable opponents? They've got some more coming up. It's going to be fascinating to watch. It's Michigan State basketball. A lot of good fans out there. A great crowd out there today. Izzo gave a lot of credit to them. He said, elephant in the room, we know we've been struggling, but the crowd was really responsive, and the way they reacted to Izzo, he thought that was great. And it was. It was a good atmosphere. A noon game. That was wonderful. And we'll be covering Michigan State basketball going forward over at SpartanMag.com. Go over there and become a subscriber. Paul, appreciate your time. Didn't mean to take this much time from you. Make sure you drink all the proper liquids, Paul, and feel good and get better soon, okay?
All right, man. Take care.
There he goes, Paul Konyndyk, Associate Editor, SpartanMag.com. We're going to wrap this thing up. A lot of you guys want to go watch the Lions game. Maybe you're already there. This was not a pre-recorded or pre-scheduled Spartan Mag Live. But those of you that have tuned in on a Sunday, we appreciate that. Let me go over to the comments section and read those off before we call it a show. We got Clark Merrier saying hello, folks. Don Barry, Sports Highlights, says, hey, make the best of what's around, says Michigan State number 3 in the country in hockey. Crush Michigan next weekend. Michigan State is up to number 3 in the pairwise rankings. Swept Penn State this weekend. Great pair of victories for Michigan State. Trey Augustine coming back from the World Junior Championships pitches a shutout on Friday, 5-0. They come back on Saturday and win 7-3. 7 different Spartans scoring on Saturday. All 4 lines contributing. The defensemen getting into the offense. Contributing to the offense, joining the rush, joining the play. Good quality team. Fun team to watch. Entertaining team. Quick to the puck, winning 50-50 pucks, and when they get it and they go and they maintain possession with skill, they're finishing. Joey Larson from Brighton, 14 goals, scored another one last night. Real good right-handed slap shot from the left circle in the power play. It's become a force, and he's on the second power play unit. Doing a great job, 14 goals. Michigan State, number 2 in the country in shorthanded goals. Isaac Howard rejoining the team for World Juniors, led that tournament in goals scored, I think it was. Isaac Howard, he's going to be erupting, I would assume, at some point this year. And the way they've flipped that roster in 2 years, a lot of new faces. Culture is good for Michigan State hockey. They're quick. They can finish. And I'm not sure what the ceiling is for this team. We will learn more this weekend against a very talented Michigan team. And then in the weeks ahead against Minnesota, and then the defensive nature of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is ranked real high also. But Minnesota and Michigan, that'll tell the tale as to whether Michigan State is capable of week in and week out, day in and day out, competing with the very best in the country. And if you can compete with the very best in the country, there's a lot of interesting things you can do, things I wouldn't have thought possible in year number 2, but keep an eye on Michigan State hockey. They got it done today. This weekend. Brian Bemis checking in. Old Tuck, the bell cow, shows up. Spartan MD, 6th man. I think Spartan MD might be, 6th man, I guess, today. Good to have him checking in. MSU Hunter Spartan says, checking in from cold and snowy Wisconsin. Nice to see a Spartan win after a disappointment at Illinois. Illinois stumbled at home to Maryland by 9 today. I've not watched that game yet. It just happened. So I'm intrigued to go back and check that one out. Doug Karen checking in from West Loop, Chicago. Go Green, Spartan Nation. Victory for MSU, says Doug Karen. Doors Fan 91 says, hello, Comp. Good to see you. Break it on through to this side. Baird's Bikes video says, I thought Michigan State got the short end of the stick against Illinois with the officials. It was a one-sided deal. Officials definitely were leaving on giving Illinois favorable calls. Tom Izzo would agree with you on that, but Izzo always feels that way after they lose a game. Make the best of what's around says, Steven Izzo has outscored LeBron James in college basketball. The NBA is next. John Elge says, checking in from Clarkston. JJ McKay, good evening, Spartan friends. What an historic day. MSU. Historic in what ways, I'm wondering? You can't tell me that J.J. McKay's a Lions fan, is he? Up there in the Keweenaw Peninsula? What's it, 90% Packers up there? You better watch yourself. MSU Hunter Spartan says, I'm trying to keep the faith, but this MSU team just puzzles me. Comp is right in that you can't trust this team. Can't trust them. Let's wait and see, though. I trusted him last year. And I got on the pulpit here a couple of times and I shook a finger at people and said this team has Sweet 16 potential when they were really struggling. They were negative side of the bubble for a while. Joey Hauser was a big reason for that. Stretching and hitting shots. Having that instant offense was so important. I'm not there with this team yet. We will see how they do here in these next 11 games. Big Ten, there's some beatable teams in there, but they're not terrible. And if you show up like Michigan State did against a good Northwestern team, a lot of those games we talked about at Minnesota, at Maryland, at Penn State, even at Penn State, those can get sideways on you if you are not completely urgent and focused like they were not against Northwestern. Northwestern's good. Groove Spoon says, hey ho Spartans, Terps did look suboptimal versus Michigan in College Park last week. Yes, they did. Then they went out and beat Illinois, so figure that one out. Doors Fan says 9 p.m. starts suck no matter what the network. True. That is true. But, and Michigan State did it. And there have been some 9 o'clock starts on ESPN in the past. So, blaming Peacock a little bit, but I don't know. Small print of that great Big Ten TV contract. I don't know. John Elke says, is Izzo going to get Jeremy Fears minutes? No, I don't think Fears is going to come back this year. Yeah, they're keeping him motivated and working on it, but yeah, I don't think so. JJ McKay says Matty needs some old school stick-em for his hands. Cooper does too. Both those guys Hands is so important for any basketball player, especially big men, and not a plus for them. Now, Cooper's hands are better than they were last year, so he's making progress, but he still had some manos di piedra moments. Manos di piedra. Roberto Duran, hands of stone. Groove Spoon says, hey, JJ McKay, what's your weekend snow totals so far up there in the Keweenaw? 20 inches or so in Grand Rapids. 20 inches of weekend snow in Grand Rapids? Impressive. JJ McKay says Friday, Saturday total 24 inches with drifts over 5 feet in the driveway. Ugh. Just finished cleaning it up a couple hours ago. 5 feet drifts. I'm a snow guy, but that's a little bit much for me. And we'll see about tomorrow. See how cold it is. I might be able to get out. JJ McKay says 28 inches. Arians snowblower. I don't know what that means. Luckily, it was a dry snow, he says, so it's better. It's a dry snow. Groovesman says, geez, man, Mother Nature making up for a mild winter. All right, enough weather talk. We're going to move on. JJ McKay made a venison manwich. Good for him. All right, Doug Karen says, loss to James Madison, not bad. Well, it's not a bad loss. Quad 3 loss, yeah, but, for a long time, James Madison was 15, 16-0 and got into the top 25. It may turn out to be a bad loss, and you're right in terms of rankings, in terms of computer rankings. A Quad 3 loss does hurt the computer rankings. When I was watching James Madison, I might have to go back and watch that game again, but they didn't strike me as like a mid-major that, I don't think they're as good as Indiana State. They didn't strike me as like a really dangerous mid-major. When Michigan State lost that game, I thought it was a garbage loss, but James Madison then went on quite a roll and won a number of games, stayed unbeaten for a long time. That's what I meant when I said it wasn't a bad loss because, like I said, at one point, they were a top 25 team. I don't know if they'll remain there. I don't know if they'll win their conference tournament. I don't know if they'll get in the NCAA tournament. So you're right. As of now, it's a Quad 3, so it's not a good loss, but that one we'll judge that one a little bit later, and that was right at the beginning of the season, opener, right? But that loss, we will judge as to whether that's a bad loss later in the year, and it very well turned out to be that way. All right, so that's about it. A special SpartanMag Live VCast because Konyndyk, feeling under the weather, couldn't make it to Breslin Center today, so we did it this way. Hoping he'll be back for the Minnesota game, back in the Breslin Center, and we'll have a VCast after that game. And we hope that you'll subscribe to the channel, give us a like, go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber as we keep our ear to the ground on Michigan State football and roster movements heading towards spring practice. Appreciate everybody checking in. We will see you next time. And thanks for all the kind words and the support from all the Spartan Maggers around the world. Thanks, and everybody have a great day, a great Martin Luther King Day on Monday. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, go to SpartanMag.com. Join us at the Underground Bunker, SpartanMag.com. Thanks, everybody.